tonight, because we are in the part of the year known as the Arba Parshios, the 4 special Mafta readings that surround Purim and Pesach. So I've decided to give a class on the next one that's coming up. I believe it's coming up this week, right? There's a Parshat Torah this week? Pretty sure. Hold on. I know it says it's Parshat Torah. Okay. And the title of tonight's class is Irrational Mitzvot for Rational Adults. Okay. Before we get started, as always, we want to express our Hakaras HaTov to the good folks at TorahAnytime.com for recording and uploading these classes and making them available for review by those who attend, and for viewing and hearing for those who are not here in person tonight. May Hashem crown all their efforts of Hafatzas HaTorah with great success. Okay. First, let me talk a little bit about the Arba Parshios, and then I'll get to the title of tonight's class. Okay, there are. If you've gone to synagogue services recently, the last couple of weeks, you've probably noticed that when it's time for Kriyas HaTorah, time for the Torah reading, they remove 2 Torah scrolls from the Ark and not just 1. And the reason for that is that we read in the first Torah scroll the weekly Torah portion according to the regularly scheduled cycle, but then there's also special mafters and haftarahs, special readings that we do that surround the upcoming holidays, Purim and Pesach. And we're up to the 3rd out of the 4 right now. And the one that we're going to be reading this coming week is called Parshat Para. The parsha, the topic, the section of the cow, or the way they like to translate it in the more highfalutin Bibles, the heifer. Which cow? A very particular cow. The Torah is full of cows. Okay? The Torah is full of all kinds of animals. So even some 2-legged ones. But the particular cow that we're talking about here is the Para Aduma, the red heifer. What was the red heifer? And what does it have to do with this time of the year? So let's take a look. Let's do a little in-text reading, as we always like to do in this class, even though it's not this week's Torah portion, it is the special reading for now, like as I said. Okay, so it's at the very beginning of Parshat Chukas. In your stone Chumashim, we're talking about page 839. Okay, take a look on page 839. And here we go. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, this is the decree of the Torah, which Hashem has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take to you a completely red cow. You don't have the place yet? Page 839. I'll give everyone a chance to get to the place. Everyone's got it? Okay. A completely red cow, which is without blemish, and upon which no yoke has come. You shall give it to Elazar the Kohen, he shall take it outside of the camp, and someone shall slaughter it in his presence. Okay. It's a long parsha, but let me tell you the salient points, and you're welcome, to keep on reading it. Basically, what happens is they slaughter this cow, which is called a paraschatas. It's called a sin offering. But very strangely, the first head scratcher about this slaughtered cow. Okay, anything that we slaughter is normally a sacrifice, right? A sacrifice is supposed to take place in the temple compound when the Jews are wandering in the wilderness. So in the Mishkan, on the tabernacle compound. The paraduma, the mitzvah of the paraduma is mechutz lamachna. It's supposed to be slaughtered outside of the camp entirely. Okay, that's the first head scratcher. After they slaughter it, they burn it. They reduce it to ashes, and they also throw a few other ingredients into the burning pyre. They add a little bit of cedar tree, a little bit of hyssop. Hyssop is a little vegetation. If you've ever gone to the western wall, to the Kotel HaMaravi in Yerushalayim, those little weeds that grow out of the kosel, that's azov. Okay, and you also throw a shnis alas, some crimson dyed wool, and all this stuff gets burnt together. Then they take something called mayim chayim, water that hasn't been in any other vessel prior to that, and you make this water and ash mixture. What's the significance of this water and ash mixture? Turn the page 841. Okay? Verse 11 on page 841. Whoever touches the corpse of any human being shall be contaminated for 7 days. He shall purify himself with it on the third day and on the seventh day, then he will become pure. But if he will not purify himself on the third day and the seventh day, he will not become pure. Okay? Basically, there's a whole body of Torah law called Tumah v'Tahara. Spiritual impurity and purity. Okay, this has nothing to do with good hygiene. There's nothing to do with whether you're dirty or whether you're bacteria free. This is something that you can't touch or taste or smell, but it's called tumah. It's called an impurity, and there are various levels of impurity, and there are various means and methods for regaining purity once you've grown impure. Okay, the only one that applies in contemporary Jewish practice is something called the mikveh. The ritual learn where you've got to dip yourself in the mikveh, and that removes a certain level of ritual impurity. However, there is a level, the highest level of ritual impurity is coming in contact with corpses, with the human remains. Okay, that's something called a human being who dies. That's something that's known as the avi avos hatuma, the grandfather of all impurity. It's the highest level of impurity. And the one and only way to remove that level of impurity is through this potion, this mixture of the paraduma. Okay? If you weren't scratching your head before, you should be scratching it now. Okay? One of the other oddities of the paraduma, besides the fact that the whole thing on the surface appears like witchcraft, appears like sorcery, the idea that you have a carbon, you have something that seems to be a sacrifice to God, that you're sacrificing outside of the temple compound. Another oddity of the paraduma is that it is metaher tamayim u'metamet tahorim. Everyone who deals with the production of the paraduma becomes tameh on a lower level of tumah, not the same kind of ritual impurity as touching a dead man, a dead person, but they do become tameh. And at the same time, this ash and this potion is capable of removing the highest level of tumah. Okay, so you've got what we call the Hebrew expression for is shtei afachim b'naisei echad. You have antithetical properties going on the same thing. You have one thing that seems to be doing two diametrically opposed things. What does this have to do with this time of the year? What it has to do with this time of the year is that Passover is coming up, and many korbanot, all animal sacrifices or even meal offerings, things made out of flour, require ritual purity. You have to be in a state of tahara, you have to be in a state of purity in order to offer them, in order to walk into the temple compound, in order to eat the edible parts. Okay? But most korbanot, most offerings are optional. Okay? One that is incumbent upon each and every Jew and is time sensitive is the Korban Pesach. Okay? The night of the Seder, the first night of Passover, during the Erev Pesach, the eve of Passover, the morning before, actually the afternoon before, you've got to offer your Passover offering, and then it's eaten at night. That's why the fact that we celebrate a Seder, even nowadays, is a replica of what our ancestors used to do when the temple stood and when there were animal sacrifices and everybody was bringing a Korban Pesach. So the point is, everyone needs to be in a state of ritual purity. You cannot celebrate Passover since eating a Korban, eating sacrifice, actually it's multiple sacrifices, the night of the Seder, is part and parcel of the observance of the holiday. You've got to be in a state of ritual purity. So basically now, the time leading up to Passover, okay, we read Parshat Parah because in temple times, they were doing things with the Parah Adumah, they were doing things with this potion to masses of Jews who found themselves in a state of ritual impurity. You attended a funeral. If you were in the funeral chapel, you're in a state of ritual impurity. You don't have to actually physically touch a dead body. If you're under the same roof as a dead body, that's also a way of transmitting the impurity. So that's what it's doing this time of the year. Okay? Point number one. Point number two, the title of the class. What do I mean when I say that irrational mitzvahs for rational adults? So, let's turn our pages back. Okay, this is not my favorite chumash. I like to work with the Living Torah, and the reason I put out stone chumashim today. No, don't get a Living Torah. There's no point. I wanted the Rashi, but I don't follow exactly when or where or how they translate the Rashis.
You want the Rashi from?
No. Sit down. Forget it. No. It's too late. It's not important. You'll have to take my word for it. Okay. Now, the mitzvahs of the Torah, the commandments of the Torah, can be categorized and classified many, many different ways. They're the positive commandments and they're the negative commandments. They're the time-linked commandments, and there are the commandments that transcend time. There are commandments that have to do with our relationship with God, and there are commandments that have to do with our interpersonal relationships. A lot of different ways to categorize them. Another way to categorize them are by the words that the Torah itself uses to talk about different mitzvahs. And the greatest scholar, if you're interested, it's available in a wonderful English translation. I highly recommend one of the classic philosophical works of Rav Shamshon Hirsch. He has a book called, in English, it's called Chorev, which is a nickname for Mount Sinai. And if memory serves me correctly, his categories of the mitzvahs are edus, testimony, chukim, statutes, mishpatim, laws, mitzvos, commandments, Toros. I don't know how to translate Toros. The plural of Torah. I think he has five different categories with nuances of differences between all the five. But much earlier than him, the sages of the Talmud already basically had broader categories, divided all the mitzvahs of the Torah into two categories. The mishpatim and the chukim. We probably know that there's a weekly Torah portion that's called mishpatim. These are the mishpatim that you should place before them. And then there's something called chukim. What is the difference between chukim and mishpatim? The difference between chukim and mishpatim are that mishpatim are rational mitzvahs. Okay, by rational mitzvahs, one of the best ways to define a rational mitzvah is, as in one place in the Talmud, the Gemara says, had the Torah never been given at Sinai, some human legislator would have come up with this kind of a law. Okay? Prohibitions against murder, prohibitions against theft, some type of workable labor law, some type of workable landlord-tenant law, employer-employee law, right? Societies, totally secular societies, have developed throughout the ages, and they all have different takes and different approaches, and most of the time, they make sense. They appeal to our rationale. Right? If something seems like it's out of left field, so we U.S. citizens have a recourse, we keep on appealing it up the hierarchy of the courts until we see if the Supreme Court finds if it's constitutional or not. Okay, not necessarily is everything in the Constitution rational, but that's the idea. The idea is you have to keep on testing the law to see if it makes sense. Right? Those are the mishpatim. The chukim, the etymology of the word chok is something that's chiseled in stone. We talked, more or less conveying the idea that you can't play with it, and you can't necessarily understand it, and God gave it, and we're obedient. We bow our heads, we say this is beyond our comprehension, this is beyond our rationality, but we keep it anyway. Now, there are chukim, and then there are real chukim. Okay? Their granddaddy, I spoke before about the granddaddy of impurity, the granddaddy of all chukim. Okay, so I don't see exactly where Rabbi Artzkel translates this, so I'm going to read and translate the Rashi for you. Zos chukas ha-Torah. This is the chok of the Torah. It was the ultimate chok. There are a lot of chukim. There are a lot of irrational mitzvahs in the Torah, but this is it. This is the ultimate one. The parah aduma, the red heifer, the ultimate chok. Why? Lefisha hasatan v'umos ha'olam monin es Yisrael. Because Satan and the nations of the world demand, so to speak, an explanation from the Jewish people. They take a look at this mitzvah of the Torah, and they kind of mock us. And they say, Ma mitzvah zos? What kind of a commandment is this? Ma tam yeshba? What reason? What rationale? What explanation? Lefichach kosav ba'chuka. That is why the Torah writes about this. This is a chuka. Chuka, again, like I said, has this connotation of untouchable, chiseled in stone. Gzeira hi milafanai. It is a decree from before me. Ein lecha reshus laharer achareha. You have no permission to second guess it. So this is nonsense. This doesn't make any sense to me. I'm a rational human being. Okay? Now, everyone here in this room, I think, considers themselves a rational human being. Right? Nobody's ever checked into a psych ward. Nobody likes to think of themselves as a religious fanatic, Rabbi included. Right? And many of us have been enamored and first came back to Judaism at a later stage in life because he done explained it to me. I went to Rabbi Turk's class, and he made Judaism palatable to me. Made sense to me. You know, from the outside looking in, all my years when I was secular, when I wasn't observing any mitzvahs, a lot of stuff looked very strange and very superstitious. But now I go to Jewish adult education courses, and now I understand. Right? Very, very popular book, Sefer, Holy Sefer, in the genre of Teshuvah literature called Permission to Believe. And another in the series, Permission to Receive. What do you mean permission? Just as a self-respecting, rational human being, I can't permit myself to believe this poppycock unless you prove to me it's not poppycock. Explain it to me. Show it to me. And how President Truman used to say, I'm from Missouri. Show me. Right? And Baruch Hashem, thank God, we've been shown. Some of it is symbolic, some of it is basically just piercing the veil of political correctness and thinking a little bit more deeply, and we can understand the appeal of mitzvahs of the Torah. Okay? So what I'm here to tell you tonight is, you've all been sold a bill of goods. It's not true. We don't understand anything. Nothing. Zero. But we do. We do. This mitzvah of paraduma, if it were true, if it were only true, that Satan, it's another way of saying our Yetzirah, or the nations of the world, we're getting into polemical debates with us, we're steadfast, we're Jews, we're flying high the banner of the paraduma. It isn't that way. We look in the mirror, he said, what? Whatever. This sounds like witchcraft to me. This sounds like Esmeralda. I'm not buying into this. Right? That's the problem. The problem is not we've internalized the attacks of the nations of the world and of Satan, and we're always second guessing ourselves. So here's the thing. As many of you here have heard me say many times, okay, Jews have to be capable of holy schizophrenia. You have to be able to hold two mutually exclusive thoughts in your mind at the same time. On the one hand, as I will show you in a bit, we have to be willing to bow our heads to God and say, I don't care if none of it's rational. I don't care if I can't understand anything. I understand this much. My rationale tells me that you have a higher intelligence, you have a higher rationale, And if you tell me to do this, I'm going to obey. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there is a long time honored tradition in Judaism of ta'amei ha-mitzvahs, of providing reasons for mitzvahs. And it begins with the Torah itself. The Torah itself. Let me see if I can find it quickly. If not, I think it's at the end. Yeah. Just a few pages. Yeah. Take a look at the bottom of page 817 and the top of page 819. Okay? This is the mitzvah of tzitzit, of putting fringes on four-cornered garments. Right? So take a look on page 817. Okay? Verse 39. It shall constitute tzitzis for you, that you may see it and remember all the commandments of Hashem and perform them. Tzitzis is there. The Torah itself is providing a reason for tzitzis. Tzitzis is a memento. It's a reminder. It's a mnemonic, however you pronounce that word. Right? I'm not going to go into right now how looking at tzitzis reminds you that there are 613 mitzvahs. But that the Torah is saying. That's what it's there for. It's there to remind you that there are 613 mitzvahs. And if you know there's 613 mitzvahs, hopefully you will fulfill and observe as many of them as you can. But all through the ages, Maimonides wrote the Guide to the Perplexed. Okay? The Sefer Chinuch, the book of mitzvah education, where there have been organized classes here at the center, in that book, is a classic book of both mitzvah counting and mitzvah philosophy, where every single mitzvah the author attempts, and he wrote as a Machiavelli wrote the prince, to give to his king of his principality, to show him how to manipulate and cheat and claw his way to power. And in Judaism, there's a Sefer Chinuch. What's a Sefer Chinuch? It's unknown authorship. The scholars disagree about who exactly the author is. We know it's from the period of the Rishonim, from the medieval sages. But it's clear, if you read the foreword of the Sefer Chinuch, whoever the author was, he wrote as a bar mitzvah present for his son. He said, you're about to turn 13. It's not just about tefillin. You're a bar mitzvah. You're going to, all the mitzvahs are going to be incumbent upon you. Don't you need to know what they are? What the 613 mitzvahs are? And since you're a youngster, and you think you have the world figured out, he writes this. I'm paraphrasing, but approximately this is what he says. Okay. And I know that you and the wild guys that you run with, right? If something doesn't appeal to your rationality, you say, these old geezers, they don't know what they're doing, forget it, I'm not doing this. So therefore, I'm going to write a tam for every mitzvah, as much as I can, as much as the good Lord helps me, I'm going to provide you with some rationale for every mitzvah. Okay? So it's a long time-honored tradition, starting from the Chumash itself, running through the Talmud and the Midrashim, to the medieval sages. I mentioned before of Shimshon Hirsch. He basically won back German Jewry to orthodoxy by writing classic tomes on the meaning of mitzvahs and the compelling rationale. Yeah? So that's on the one hand. Let me share with you, I'm going to give you a running translation of a beautiful sefer called Pele Yoetz. Pele Yoetz under the heading of Tam, reason or rationale. He says as follows. Okay. It's important to know every mitzvah, and it's also important to know the reason behind the mitzvah. Because there's a danger. On the one hand, you can say, what could be a higher religious obligation than performing mitzvahs? Because they're a mitzvah, there's a commandment. God commanded me to do it. He's the commander, I'm the commandee, and that's why I do it. Finished. Very religious, very, very respected person, right? Well, yes and no. Because you're still a human being, and God did endow you with a mind. And when you do all the mitzvahs that way, you run the problem of mitzvahs anashim melumada. You're going to start doing things by rote. You'll be a robot. You'll be an automaton. If you can't find something intellectually or emotionally or culturally, symbolically, on some level, something about the mitzvah that you're performing that speaks to you. It's just a cut and dry, I was given my orders, and I'm here to fulfill my orders. Right? So then it becomes rote practice. And God gets very angry at that. God doesn't want that. God doesn't want that kind of blind obedience. The Peli right. Yeah? Like he told the Navi Yeshaya, Yanki Nigash Amazev Vati Yerusam Aisi Mitzvot Anashim Ulumada. Their God-fearingness was Mitzvot Anashim Ulumada, people going through the motions, people going through the road. Robots. I don't want that. I don't want robots. I have enough robots. They're called angels. You know, they don't have microchips, but that's basically what they are. I want human beings. I want people who do it with heart and with soul and with mind. That's what I want. And there are times when you do a mitzvah without any mind behind it, without any rationale behind it. It's like a lifeless corpse, like a body without a soul. And he uses the classic example I just gave. Look at the mitzvah tzitzis. He says, if you would do the mitzvah tzitzis and not be mindful of the reason behind tzitzis, that says in the Torah itself. So it's almost you're missing the whole point. Well, God's interested in your haberdashery and the strings that you wear. If the strings that you wear, okay, don't move you to remember mitzvahs or to remember the exodus from Egypt or everything else that it says about tzitzis, so what do I need you to wear the strings for? You know? People walk through a door every day, 20 times a day to kiss a mezuzah. Do you know that the name on the mezuzah, Shin Daled Yud, stands for Shomer Dalsis Yisrael? The God is the guardian of the portals of Israel. Does it move you to realize that you have a constant and loving relationship with God? If it doesn't, who needs your little scroll on the wall? In a certain sense, right? Okay. Putting on tefillin to bind your heart and to bind your mind to God. If you don't know that about the tefillin, so again, very cute. You put on leather boxes with some parchment in it. What does it mean? All right? And he says very sharp words here. He says, somebody who does not know Tamei HaMitzvah, somebody who does not know reasons and rationales for mitzvahs, is almost naked of mitzvahs, is denuded of mitzvahs. And if you don't know, ask. And roll in the dust of the feet of the wise sages who do know. So you should know something about it. Another great advantage, he says, to knowing the reasons behind the mitzvahs is that, so to speak, when you know not just the letter of the law, but you know the spirit of the law, then you can expand upon it on some level. Right? He gives you an example. If you know what's wrong with lending on interest, there are legal loopholes. You can get around lending on interest. But if you really understand what it's about, you're not looking for loopholes. In every department, you know, all the great Jewish thinkers say that immediately the Hasidus, okay, Hasidus, I'm not talking about Lubavitch Hasidim or Satmar Hasidim, I don't mean the Baal. The classic meaning of the word a Chassid. A Chassid is a level greater than a tzaddik. A tzaddik is somebody who observes all the laws, and a Chassid is somebody who goes above and beyond the call of duty. And the mashal that they give, or the model that they give for going above and beyond the call of duty is this. There's a mitzvah of the Torah to honor your parents. Okay? So let's say your father commands you, he says, look, I'm coming home, I've had a rough day at the office, make sure that my lazy boy recliner is in good repair, and that my slippers are there. Because when I come home, I'm going to plop myself down on the lazy boy, and I want to get my tight shoes off, and I want to put up my feet, and I'm going to want my slippers. Okay. The wise child, the son or the daughter or the father, understands to bring the father a cup of coffee or a martini, as the case may be, the afternoon paper. Right? It's about relaxation. It's about unwinding. So the father may have told you certain things explicitly about unwinding, and you know that's what dad wants, so you anticipate the rest. Right? When you understand the time of the mitzvahs, you know, so to speak, what's God's agenda here? What's he after? Okay? Then it's possible to expand upon it, to go with the thing, to catch the spirit of the law, as it were. If you don't have that, if you don't have the time of mitzvahs, you'll never get the other parts right. Okay, I don't want to belabor the point. The point is, he's very much in favor of rationalizing whatever we can rationalize. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, do we really understand anything? So here, I have to apologize. I don't know what the first I thought it was one of these Nusach Ashkenaz versus Nusach Svard divergences. And then I looked in an art scroll, English Nusach Svard said it, and they didn't have it either. There are yotzers, there are extra passages of prayers that we say on these 4 special Shabbosim. It's not just what you read more from there, and there are various customs. Some congregations do say it, some don't. But just to give you a model of it, it's like on the high holidays, on Rosh Hashanah or on Yom Kippur, you go to shul, and during the Chazin's repetition, you're not just listening to the Chazan repeat Shemona Esrei like you would on a regular weekday or on a regular Shabbos. There's extra stuff that you say during the Chazin's repetition. So collectively that's known as Yotzrot, right? And every one of these 4 special Shabbosim, plus Shabbos Hagol, plus the Shabbos before Pesach, which has no special Haftarah, has these special prayers. I was looking for one in English for you, to share with you, from Parshas Parah. But I wasn't able to find one, so I don't know how many of you are literate in Hebrew, but I'm going to hand this one out, and you're going to have to humble me for the translation. But let's talk a little bit about mitzvahs that we feel that we have a grasp on. Okay, Elise, you think you have a pretty good handle on kosher? Your kitchen has been kosher for quite a number of years now, right? Okay. Do you know what chaylev is?
No.
Do you know what chaylev is, Joseph?
Yes.
What is chaylev?
Chaylev is the part that is like a fat that is between the muscles and the bone.
The hindquarter fats are forbidden. Okay.
Right, okay.
All right. Why they should be forbidden? Anybody know?
That I know.
Yeah?
It's because when Yaakov was fighting with
No, that's the Gidon Nasha. That's sciatic nerve. That's something else.
that's the side nerve.
Yeah, that's only the sciatica nerve. That's not the...
Okay,
it's,
sorry.
right. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, here's the question, though. If God doesn't like fat, or for us to consume fat, right? Parenthetically, to eat chaylev is worse than to eat pork. Pork is just a garden variety prohibition. Chaylev is a kares. Much more severe punishment for eating a T-bone steak from a glot kosher cow carcass than to eat a ham sandwich. Okay? But here's the question. If God doesn't like fat, why can we eat fat from the front part of the animal's carcass? Okay?
You must be thinking about the hind part of the animal's carcass.
But you don't know what it is. I happen to know, but I'm not sure. I'm working with the liturgical poet here. Okay? Next one. Okay?
What
Yeah.
do you mean from the front part?
There is forbidden fats called chaylev, and there's permitted fats called shuman. But chemically, they're exactly the same. It's just, are you surrounding the rump roast and then the T-bone steak and stuff like that? It's forbidden. Fat grizzle that's in the rib steak or on the flank, and that's okay. You're allowed to eat it.
That's like chaylev is very much concentrated. It's like a rope inside the
Okay,
animal thing. But
fine. But still, it does give you pause, you know. If there's something wrong with the fat, why is there something wrong with all fat? Okay, here's another one. We know, we don't do it anymore, but maybe we remember a grandmother or a great aunt who did it. Kusha machen the fleisch. People used to make their own meat kosher, which involved soaking and salting and soaking again. You have to leach out the blood. Okay. Now, liver is almost entirely blood. It's a blood filter of the body. Why does the Torah allow us to eat liver? What Jewish simcha go through that there's no chopped liver, or at least an Ashkenazi Jewish simcha. All right? You like blood, you don't like blood. If you don't like blood, there are a lot of things that are further removed from what the Torah actually prohibited than the liver is from blood. Do you know that in the Torah, if the rabbis hadn't gotten involved, there'd be nothing wrong with a chicken or a turkey cheeseburger? The whole prohibition of mixing meat and milk doesn't go on birds. It only goes on actual animals. Right? But Torah said, no, it's too close. Not the Torah. The rabbi said, this looks too close. That looks too close, but liver you're allowed to eat. Huh? Settle that. Okay. We just read about tzitzis. Everybody knows what tzitzis is. Tzitzis is to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Tzitzis is to remember the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Right? How about this? Shatnez. Anyone know what shatnez is? What? Okay, it's a prohibited mixture of, not of meat and milk, not what we eat, but what we wear. Right? You can't have wool and linen combinations. Now, does anyone know, other than wool, what the only other Torah mandated fiber for tzitzis is? You guessed it, linen. Now, what happens if you've got a linen talus and you have to put tchelis on the talus? And tchelis has to be blue-dyed wool. Blue-dyed linen doesn't cut it. So in the olden days, when we knew exactly what tchelis was, now people think they've rediscovered tchelis, but let's go to a time that was less historically controversial. When we knew what that blue dye was, right, and you've got a linen talus, so you tie it with blue tchelis. What's going on over here? Does the Torah like a wool-linen combination, or does the Torah detest a wool-linen combination?
Wasn't the Kohen Gadol's garments the mixture?
Even more than that, right? It's an argument if it was the belt of the Kohen Gadol or the belt of the regular Kohanim. Okay?
Isn't it about being woven together?
No, tied together is prohibited too. If you would do it in a non-ritual setting, it would be absolutely forbidden. Okay. We know that the Torah has a lot of incest laws that might make secular authorities scratch their head. One of them is you cannot marry your brother's wife. Reuben and Shimon are brothers, and Shimon divorces Rachel. Reuben cannot marry Rachel. What about if Shimon dies with no children? Then there's a mitzvah. Then it becomes a lover. Do we like this relationship? Is it icky? Is it incestuous? Or is it okay? If it's okay, it should always be okay. If it's not okay, how can it be a mitzvah? How can the same relationship, in one case, be a horrible sin, an act of incest, and in another case, be a mitzvah? Okay? I'll give you a few that the Payaton, that the liturgical poet does not talk about. What about graven images? No, right? Bad.
But they have lions.
What? Well, actually, I don't know. That's going out of style. If you look at a lot of synagogue art in the last 50 years, you don't see that many lions and eagles. But forget about the lions and eagles. What about that's it. What? The cherubim in the temple itself, on the holiest site on earth. There are two graven images. You got these things with the faces of babies. What are we? What's that all about? Okay, pass this around, and I just want you to get the poetry of it a little bit. Okay.
I don't read anything extra on this Shabbat.
Could be.
No, I know.
I'll tell you a great story. The Ger Rabbi and the Ger Chassidim don't say anything extra anytime. I don't think even a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So the Ger Rabbi was a silent partner with Mr. Goldman. He had a famous Otzer Asraim Goldman, a famous Sraim store, Judaica store on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It started in Warsaw, Poland. So around 1930, 1932, this guy, Mr. Goldman, goes into his Rebbe, who also happens to be his silent business partner. He says, Rebbe, I have a great idea. Let's publish a Gerer Siddur. There's a Lubavitcher Siddur. There's a Barditchever Siddur. A lot of different guys Siddurim. Let's publish a Gerer Siddur. It'll be without all of those extra liturgical poems. It'll be a thin little volume. Production costs will be low. You'll write a one-line approbation that all the Chassidim, this is the way we daven and ger, and we should have a unified, a book of common prayer, so to speak, and we'll make a killing on it. Ger Rabbi shakes his head. He says, you call yourself a businessman? I said, what's wrong? It's a great idea. He said, no, it's a terrible idea. He says, don't you understand? Everybody loves to skip the pages. Nobody's going to buy a thin siddur. The whole fun of davening is when it's a thick siddur and you get to skip the pages.
So psychology.
What?
Psychology.
Yeah. Okay. In the middle of the page, Ein l'socheach. Okay? Ein l'socheach otzem niflosecha. Okay, it goes down. You don't read it across. You read the columns till you get there. Okay? One should not even speak about the depth of your wonders. Ein lahar racha midosecha. Nobody should second guess your midos. Ein lahagid cheker dososecha. No one can tell the investigation of your religion. Ein lahavan tokef mifalasecha. There's no way to understand the might of your deeds. Ein lefaneach omech ploasecha. There's no way to uncover the depths of your wonders. Ein lamed al sefer midosecha. Okay, go to the next column, the second-hand column. Hamavaroros chasumos. Even the things that seem to be explained, they're really locked up and incomprehensible. Hamashunanos atzumos. I don't know how to translate that. Chakukos reshumos. The things that are chukim, that seem to be irrational, they're actually reshumos, they're registered and they are understandable. Hakaseros miyutaros. Things that seem to be missing are actually extra. Ha'asuros mutaros. Here it doesn't mean what's forbidden is permitted. It means what's locked up is really liberated. Hashcharos tcharos. Things that look black are actually white. Okay, you get the idea. You see where this liturgical poet is going. Now go to the bottom of the page, 4 lines from the bottom. Now he's going through, I didn't come up with all these great ideas. I ripped it off from this poem over here. Min ha'chelev, shoy min ha'lev. Chelev is not allowed, but the thick fat, the rope-like fat that surrounds the heart, because it's in the front quarters of the animal, that's allowed. Min adam atchol v'kaved adam, from the blood that runs through the spleen and the liver, which are permitted, dam, which is not permitted. Umibasa b'chalav k'chal b'chalav. You're not allowed to eat meat and milk combinations, but you could eat the udder of a cow. The udder of the cow is where the meat and milk combine organically. Why should the udder of a cow be allowed? Okay? Miklai begadim tchelis besadin. From shatnez, you can have tchelis in a linen talis. Me'eshes ach yibum hach. Okay, the next column on the left side. From the sister-in-law, the levirate marriage. Me'eshes ish, you're not allowed to marry married women. Yifastar lish. Okay, there's a law in the Torah that when they're in war, they can take captives, women who appeal to them, even if she's legally married at the time. Okay, turn the page, look at the top of the next one. Here's really one of the most amazing ones. Okay? Baheres muad, the right-hand side. Mitame tahar, mitahar tame, the heading on the top of the page. From that which is impure, you get purity, and from that which is pure, you get impurity. Baheres muad mitame. Okay? The rule is, when there was the laws of Mitzvot, the laws of the leper, right? In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, that's also something that causes impurity. Certain dermatological conditions, they call it leprosy, but it's obviously not leprosy. Certain dermatological conditions. Okay, so one of them is, if you've got a white discoloration on your skin, about the size of a dime, okay? That makes you tummy. You need to be quarantined. There's a whole process for that person's tar. It doesn't involve the paraduma, but there's a whole sophisticated purification ritual, right? But listen to this. Parcha bekulai oid baltatame. But if that white discoloration spreads and covers the person's whole body, they're pure. Huh? A little bit hurts, and when it's spread, that's like saying, well, you know, you've got about this much cancer, you're going to die. Oh, but if it metastasizes, you'll be okay. That's what this law seems to be. Okay? Hameis babayas einatami yatsu menoisa metame. Okay, this is talking about fetal demise. Okay, when a woman's embryo dies in utero, okay, so she's not ritually impure as long as it's in her body. Once it leaves the body, then she becomes tummy. What? I mean, if the agency of tumah is the dead embryo within her, so why isn't she tummy? All right. Sir Yom Kippur mechaper al kol tameh v'chol masiku b'gav metameh. The scapegoat, okay, brought atonement for everybody, but anyone who handled the scapegoat becomes tameh, which we associate impurity with sin. This thing is an agent to atone for sin, and yet anyone who deals with it becomes ritually impure. The top of the left-hand column, para aduma isaha metame. Same thing with the red heifer. The red heifer, anyone who produces the red heifer gets a certain low level of tumah. V'hi asuya l'tayr kol tumah. And yet the red heifer itself is made to remove all tumah. The efra nasa ava tumah, the one who burns it and produces the the ashes is an avatuma, the himatayeres of the avozatuma, and yet it can purify a higher level of tumah than it itself generates. Okay. Basically, what I mean to say over here is as follows. Yes, we understand a lot of the mitzvahs, and even the so-called chukim. Okay, there have been many rational acts. I heard Joseph talking about before the class started. Is kashrus rational or not rational? Okay. Now I have to tell you, but before I bring this thing in for a landing, I have to tell you that even the Peleioites, who makes this very spirited argument for studying Tamei HaMitzvos, okay, hedges his bets. And believe it or not, the Sefer HaChinuch that I quoted earlier, the one who gave the Bar Mitzvah present to his son, does so as well in some of the mitzvahs. And this is what he says. He says there is a danger, though. There's a lot of wonderful reasons for Tamei HaMitzvos. You do it with more spirit, with your mind's engaged, your heart's engaged. You want to do it. You don't have to force yourself to do it. You don't have to swallow hard. It's not rote practice. You catch the spirit of like you expect. But here's the danger. Okay? What happens? Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. Those who live by the rationale shall die by the rationale. Okay? You go to a Gateways weekend or an Arachim weekend, and they show you all the scientific wisdom in the Torah. That's impressive. Wow. Maimonides, he knew the lunar cycle to the 8th decimal point 2,000 years before NASA. Impressive. Okay? And what happens when you go to a free-thinking website and they show you that the Talmud also believes in science that's been totally discredited? Spontaneous generation. What was the Copernican revolution? What's it called? A solocentric universe and a terracentric universe. Talmud seems to imply that the sun revolves around the earth. So, okay, you brought me into Judaism by showing me scientific wisdom, but I see there's a lot of scientific poppycock in there too. It's non-committal, right? For years, people were saying, okay, that the reason for the kashrus laws is because pork transmits trichinosis, a certain food poisoning, and beef doesn't. I guess this is before mad cow disease. Now I think pork is actually healthier than beef. But in the olden days, right, trichinosis. So somewhere in the beginning of the late 19th, early 20th century, when refrigeration became more popular, some Reform rabbi in Germany woke up and he said, hey, we don't have to worry about trichinosis anymore. Trichinosis was only a problem in the days before refrigeration. Now we have refrigeration. Now pork is kosher. What's the reason for Shabbos observance? God wants a day of rest, taking it easy. Electricity comes out. Oh, you know how arduous building a fire was for those our nomadic ancestors, those Bedouins in the Sinai desert? They had to rub two sticks together and get out kindling, and they expended 5,000 calories in the process. And, whew, was that work? Now, you flip a switch, that's work. Right? So sometimes, when you present a rationale for something, so when the rationale is limited, when it doesn't answer to all historical contingencies, to all new scientific discoveries, out the window. You throw out the baby with the bathwater. Oh, I can't do this if it doesn't appeal to me anymore. If it doesn't speak to me anymore. So he says this, the Peleiotes. It is a wonderful thing to know the rationale for mitzvahs, but there is a downside. There is a danger that once the rationale is gone, you're going to lose it. Now, let me talk particularly about the paraduma. There's a medrash that says, what does it mean at the beginning of the parsha when it says, again, page 839? Hashem spoke to Moses saying, this is the three of Israel which Hashem has commanded, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take to you. It's a very weird construct. V'yikchu elecha. It's a good translation, but it's a weird construct of the sentence. What does it mean they shall take to you? Is it yours? Is it theirs? What does it mean? So there are two interpretations of this. One is that Moshe Rabbeinu had to pay out of pocket. They shall take to you because you paid for it. Moshe Rabbeinu had to pay for the first red heifer. Okay? Another interpretation the Medrash says is, okay, L'cha ani megala ta'amei para ula'acherem chuka. To you I will reveal the reasons behind the red heifer. For everyone else, it's going to be an irrational mitzvah. So much so that the wisest of all men, that is to say, after Moshe Rabbeinu, after Moses, was Shlomo HaMelech, the third Jewish king. Saul, David, Shlomo. Shlomo says, I should say, in Koheles, Amarta echkama v'hirechoka mimeni. I said I shall grow wise, but in point of fact, wisdom is very far from me. Amarti echkama, I said I'll grow wise, v'hirechoka mimeni, it's far away from me. So the Medrash reveals that Shlomo HaMelech was referring specifically to this mitzvah, to paraduma. I can't figure it out. I'm trying, and I've plumbed all the mystical depths of the Torah. I just can't get it. Holy books say, I don't know if it's Mekubalim, the Chassidim say, that the very name Shlomo, it's a word jumble. If you rearrange the letters of the word Shlomo, it spells LeMoshe, to Moses. He was striving to be like Moshe. That's the identity of Shlomo HaMelech. He wants to crack the code, not the Da Vinci Code. He wants to crack the code of the paraduma. He wants to figure it out. But he can't figure it out. It's beyond him. But beyond the wisest of all men. The man possessed of Solomonic wisdom. So here's the question. It's very simple. In terms of ritual mitzvahs, there's such a rich symbolism to the paraduma. Rashi quotes somebody called Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, and he says, you know how the paraduma works? It's very simple. Paraduma works because it's a cow. What's the offspring of a cow? What are the babies of a cow called?
Calf.
A calf. The big granddaddy sin of the Jewish people was the golden calf. There would not have been death anymore, according to our tradition, if they hadn't sinned with a golden calf. Death was supposed to stop at the revelation at Sinai. When the Torah was given, people were supposed to have been back on the level of Adam and Eve before the fall. The original sin of mankind was rectified, and people were supposed to be transformed into immortals. Or at least, if that's not 100% clear, at least let's put it this way. The kind of death that they would have suffered would have been a clean death, a death that doesn't leave a residue of impurity. Okay? So the main cause, what broke the Torah, what broke the revelation at Sinai, the sin of the golden calf. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the tablets, sees the worship in the golden calf, that's it, the Torah is shattered. The Torah lost its potency, lost its power to transform mankind. Okay? So, the mashal or Moshe Darshan is, he says, try to imagine that you had a woman who was in the royal court, and somehow her baby crawled away. You'll forgive the scatological mashal, but this is what Moshe Darshan says. One of her babies crawled away from her quarters into the royal palace without a diaper on. And the baby's not toilet trained, and left all kinds of chazarai all over the royal palace. So we say to the mother, come and clean up after your baby's mess. That's the paraduma. The calf is the baby, the para is the mama. Okay? There's this mess, there's this residue of impurity that your baby did, your baby caused. Come and clean it up. I don't know. Is that flimsier than tzitzis? Than the knots and the strings of the tzitzis? Reminding me, it's a beautiful metaphoric interpretation. What's so hard to understand? You have to be Solomon? Here, I said it over. I know I'm a little long-winded as a speaker. A better speaker than me would have said it over in 30 seconds. What's that? Wow! The unplumbable depths of the Torah. So, a few answers. First of all, the question becomes, the one Jew who was not involved in the sin of the golden calf was who?
Woman.
Moshe. No, Aaron was very involved. Moshe wasn't involved. Moshe's not involved, and you have to buy the paraduma out of his pocket? Okay? The other answer is really this. What was the sin of the golden calf? Idol worship, right? But what was the tam? What was the cause of the sin of the golden calf? The cause of the sin of the golden calf was everything had to make sense. The numbers had to crunch. Everything had to appeal to my rationality. I'm looking at my watch. Moshe Rabbeinu isn't back on time. This doesn't make sense. We got to jettison the old religion and come up with a new one that works for us, that speaks to us, that makes sense to us. Right? Rabbeinu Bechaya says on a certain point, another metaphor of Chazal, when Moshe Rabbeinu tried to defend the Jewish people about the golden calf, he said to God as follows, he said, God, it's their fault, it's your fault. You know what you did? I'll tell you what you did. You're like a father spoiling his son, who takes the son for a manicure, for a pedicure, to the bathhouses, he gets him perfumed, he buys him the finest silk clothing, he puts gold jewelry all over the kid, and he puts a pouch of golden coins around his neck, and then he takes him to a bordello, and he plops him down in a bordello, and he says, okay, I'll see you in a couple hours. What's the son is not supposed to sin. He said, you gave them so much gold. They weren't supposed to make a golden calf out of it. Okay, the bordello over here means the promiscuity of polytheism, of worshiping a lot of different gods, of, shacking up with this god one night and that god another night, that kind of an idea, that metaphor. So the Rabbeinu Bechaya says, this doesn't mean the gold of what they took out of Egypt or what they took out of the Sea of Reeds. This means the gold of Haskalah, of understanding things. I'm also very fond of trying to find parallels between international culture and Judaism, right? Jack and the Beanstalk, I think, is David and Goliath. Cinderella is how David got chosen to be king. A lot of different things. Excalibur is Moshe Rabbeinu's staff in the stone in Yisro's garden. Okay, I have another one for you. Icarus and Daedalus, you ever heard of that one? The Greeks have this legend, have this myth. There was a master carpenter with a son who wanted to fly. He wanted to break the boundaries of human limitation, wanted to fly. So his father made him a frame of wings, and they put feathers on it, and they put wax on it, and he started flapping the wings, and he started to fly. And he was just enjoying the altitude so much, that he wasn't paying attention, and he got so close to the sun that the wax melted. The wax melted, the feathers flew off. That's it. He crashed to the ground. Okay? Judaism has one like that too. Except, it's not with physical flight and reaching too high, exceeding your grasp. It talks about the 4 people who entered the Pardes. There were 4 sages of Israel who entered the garden of the mystical secrets of the Torah. Rabbi Akiva, Ben Zoma, Ben Azai, and Elisha ben Avuya Acher. Only Rabbi Akiva entered and left peaceably. He was able to handle it. The other 3, Elisha ben Avuya lost his faith, and the other 2, I don't remember, Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, one of them died, and one of them lost his mind. Okay? And this is our metaphor for human beings trying to reach too high. Human beings trying to go beyond what they're capable of. And I don't know if it's a testimony to the greatness of Rabbi Akiva's mind or the greatness, I think, of Rabbi Akiva's spirit that he was able to handle it. But the Rabbeinu Bechaya learns that this medrash that says, you gave them too much gold, did not mean, again, the physical gold of Mitzrayim, the physical gold of the Sea of Reeds. It meant the revelation at Sinai. They saw too much at Sinai. They saw too much of the inner workings of heaven. It was too great a prophetic experience, too great a mystical experience. It's not healthy to know so much. Bad things start to happen. You die. You lose your mind. You lose your faith. You come up with weird notions of what your faith should be. That's how you led them into sin. I forget who this is, if this is the Malbim or verse. One of the great Jewish thinkers has said, this whole word, ta'amei ha-mitzvos, I've been translating it the whole evening, the rationale, the reason behind mitzvahs. The real translation of the word tam is what? Taste. Would our food be any less nutritious if it was tasteless? As a matter of fact, most of the tasteless foods, most of the salt-free and sugar-free foods are more nutritious. They're healthier for us, right? It's one of the great loving kindnesses of Hashem, great chasadim of Hashem, that food does not just sustain our life, but it's a pleasurable experience too. That's what Tamei HaMitzvahs are also. The rationale of the mitzvahs, they give a taste to the mitzvahs. They make them, the Yiddish word is geschmack. Geschmack. It's pleasurable. It's pleasure-giving. I feel ratified. I feel righteous. I feel spiritual. Different people feel different things, right? But we have to understand, okay, that again, that the nutritive value of the mitzvah, the rationale for the mitzvah is beside the point. It would nourish us, and it would nourish our souls just the same, whether it does have a good taste or whether it's totally tasteless, or maybe even if it has a bad taste. A great story they tell over to the two rabbis, the Ger Rabbi and the Satmar Rabbi. Ger Rabbi was of a political and philosophical framework that the state of Israel is not a bad thing, and on a certain level, Torah-observant Jews should be participating in the government and so on and so forth. And he had a political party that he backed, the Agudah, and he held it was a mitzvah to vote in the elections. And the Satmar Rebbe has a very anti-Zionist ideology. It's like it's the worst thing in the world to recognize the state of Israel, to vote. Horrible. Anyway, the Satmar Rebbe, this is in the 50s, was visiting Jerusalem once, and it was around election time, and he saw placards all over town, and it was this time of the year, it was right before Pesach, and he saw placards all over town, signed by a lot of rabbis. One of them was the Ger Rabbi, how it's a mitzvah to go and vote for the Agudah slate, for the Gimel Dalet slate. So Satmar Rebbe goes into the Ger Rabbi and he says, "Ya Ger Rabbi, mitzvah? Pink v'essen matzah? It's a mitzvah the same way in a few weeks it'll be the night of Pesach, like eating matzah?" He says, "No, Satmar Rebbe, like eating maror." Huh? Sometimes you got to swallow hard and you got to do the mitzvah, even if it's a negative time. Even if it's a time, say, "What? That's the time? I don't want to do it." Okay, so irrational mitzvahs for rational beings. Yes, we can be rational, and we've heard the argument how, and we've seen the time-honored tradition how we should look and look and look. But ultimately, okay, we also have to be able to accept the idea that God's lo machshavosai machshavosechem lo dachem drachem Hashem. My thoughts are not your thoughts, my deeds are not your deeds, so saith the Lord. So every human being, because they're a mature adult, because they're not the 13-year-old who thinks that they have the world figured out, that the Sefer HaChinuch is writing to, and because we understand that things are beyond our grasp, and even beyond Einstein's grasp, and even beyond Stephen Hawking's grasp, and because we recognize that, we've got to be willing and we've got to be able to bow our heads in subservience to God and say, even if I don't understand it, I'm going to do it anyway. And as a matter of fact, I forget again who, one of the great rabbis says, don't understand Rav Moshe Darshan's metaphor so simply. A mother, a diaper. The sin of the golden calf, like I was telling you, was hyper-rationalization. Too much rationalization, knowing too much. The numbers don't crunch. Moshe's not on time. Or like the Rabbeinu Bachai says, oh, I see everything. The heavens opened up. I understand everything. I see everything. The Para Aduma, the ultimate head scratcher. What are these ingredients? This witchcraft. It's a carbon. It's outside the Beis HaMikdash. It purifies some people. It impurifies other people. It's a totally rational mitzvah. But I'm doing it anyway? That's the tikkun. That's the repair for what I did wrong with the with the golden calf. I just want to end with a word I once heard from Shlomo Carlebach, the singer. Beautiful thing that we say in davening. Mishars of Shalom Zelazah, I am a Kankavayel. God's servants are talking about the angels. Ask one another, where is his holy place that I should be able to laud him? I should be able to praise him. So he used to say it like this, it's very sweet and cute, but, 30, 40 years ago, so the Jews for Jay came out with bumper stickers that say, I found it. And NCSY came out with a bumper sticker that says, we never lost it. He says, but the truth of the matter is, if you really want to consider yourself a servant of God, beware of the people who say, I found it. I found it. I never lost it. I know exactly where God is. I know the explanation for everything. I understand everything. No. Mishars of the angels who were closest to him, they asked one, where is he? It's always a game of hide and seek. Peekaboo, I see it for a second, then it conceals itself. There is a rationale, then I have another question, then that rationale disappears, then I find a deeper level of rationale. But it's a lifelong search. Mishars of, if you really want to count yourself a servant of God, you have to ask yourself and one another the question, I am a Kohen Kavod. Where is he? Where is he? I can't find him. He's God. I'm only man. I can't grasp him. And the famous words of the Rambam, Ilu Yadaitiv Hayisiv. If I would know God, I would be God. That's my class for tonight.